who tells off the mummy.
My dad is going to kick your ass.
I do not think so.
Instead of the creepy atmosphere of the earlier films, this one plays like a Hong Kong martial arts wannabe. But Rachel Weisz and Patricia Velasquez look too rehearsed after the genius of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Mete que saca tu belleza.
That's a little something new.
Here's an example of special effects overkill. Computer-generated creatures as far as the eye can see, intercut with Fraser fighting his enemy Imhotep, played by Arnold Vosloo. But it's all by the numbers. Did you notice after that ancient Egyptian canine sand creature army is defeated and disappears back into the sand, the victorious army didn't lose a single person. Yeah. Nobody dead, nobody wounded. You'd think that after waiting 4,000 years, they could have done better than that. The 1999 movie developed atmosphere and suspense and allowed Brendan Fraser and the other actors to do something with their characters. This one just turns up the heat and blasts us with mindless and repetitive action. Some of the computer animation is good, but other scenes look like they belong in a cartoon. And the Scorpion King is a real disappointment. The Rock turns up briefly at the beginning and again at the end, but when he's the Scorpion King, I don't think he's even really there. It looks like an animated version of his face on top of what looks like a very angry lobster tail. Thumbs down.
Yeah, and that Scorpion King kind of moves jerkily like 1950s monsters. I thought the first movie was kind of a cheese fest, and I think this one is even cheesier, and I think they know it, because they're going for pure campiness here. I mean, they're making all kinds of in-jokes. They're almost looking at the screen like Hope and Crosby and going, wink, wink. The problem is it's not very funny. And I also don't think that the Mummy is very scary.
No,
there are no frightening moments in this movie.
That's right. There's nothing really scary or creepy. It's just all blasting us with kinetic action. Yeah. The one character who I like was little Freddie Boat, because when he's kidnapped and they take him away, he drives his villainous ancient Egyptian captors crazy.
Are we there yet?
Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
But the Mummy himself is like, it's like he's in an Agatha Christie movie at one point. Like the Mummy takes a train and he's got his own car on this train. It's just, it's a lot of stuff, and they're trying really hard, but I think ultimately almost all of it doesn't work.
And I like the first movie, but
I didn't like the first one either, but not this one at all. Okay, our next movie is Time and Tide, which had me asking, is it possible to recommend a film even if you didn't know what the hell was going on half the time? The answer is yes, if that film is directed by Choi Hark with an abundance of crazy, eye-popping imagination. Nicholas C. is Tyler, a ruffian who impregnates a lesbian cop and then joins his shady uncle's bodyguard business so he can funnel some cash to the woman. Here he struggles with a would-be assassin. Taiwanese pop music star Wu Bai is Jack, a former mercenary who strikes an alliance with Tyler and is drawn back into a world of shootouts, holdups, and explosion. There's also an amazing gun battle that takes place between two tenement buildings. Like Tyler, Jack is a guy with a shady past who's trying to go straight for the benefit of a pregnant woman. That's their bond. There's also a lot of stuff involving robberies and drug cartels and cops with shifting values, but if you asked me to draw a plot outline, it would look like an Etch-a-Sketch portrait after an earthquake. Still, Hark fills every inch of the screen with extended action sequences that show everything from the inside of a loaded gun being aimed to the items in an apartment freeze-framed a millisecond after an explosion. Time and Tide is a fireball of confusion, but I did like it a lot.
You know, I liked it too, and for the same reasons you did. And I didn't understand the plot. I don't think even as well as you did. And after a while, everybody in the movie seems to know what their relationship is, and they don't bother to tell us.
At least they know.
But you know, I just criticized The Mummy Returns for being nonstop action. This movie is even more nonstop action, but on the other hand...
But it's creative
Yes,
action.
and
it's
Hart is a
different.
director who is a genius at this kind of film. And there's a scene where a guy rappels on a rope down the interior courtyard of a high-rise apartment building with the camera going straight down after him, and how they did that, I do not know. There are stunts in this movie that are clearly stunts and not animation that are amazing, and the action never stops, and it always bases itself on props that are right at hand.
There's a scene at the end where a woman is giving birth and squeezing the trigger of a gun at the same time. I've never seen that before, so there's a lot of amazing stuff in there, well worth checking out.
The hero is assisting at the birth and tells the woman, you shoot him if he comes through that door while I get...
In the meantime, guys are yelling out lines like, what about the champagne? That I don't know what it means, but it's okay by me.
Coming up later in the show, you need a fast connection for a lot of movies on the internet, but not for Michaela Pereira's latest discoveries. Coming up next, Town and Country stars Warren Beatty and Diane Keaton. So why did the studio hide it from the critics?
You would hate this movie so much. It was about this sweet little woman married this sweet little man, and then she discovers that he's having an affair with his secretary, and she pushes him out the window.
To our friends, to our good friends.
To our best friends.
Best friends, to our best friends. Porter, Ellie, this is in celebration of 25 years of marriage.
Oh. Perfect marriage.
Perfect marriage. Warren Beatty is married to Diane Keaton, and Gary Shandling is married to Goldie Hawn there, and before long, both marriages will be shattered by cheating in Town and Country. This is a movie that took 3 years to make, is said to have cost $85 million, and yet the studio deliberately screened it too late for most critics' deadlines and for this show last week. Obviously, they thought it was bad. I didn't think it was great, but hey, it wasn't that bad. Here's a funny scene where the parents find out more about their maid's new boyfriend.
And why is Alejandro not wearing a shirt?
Honey.
Well, that's what he's used to, living in the jungle and all.
Honey.
Living in the jungle? I'm just curious. Why would he be living in the jungle?
Porter.
Well, because that's where his group lived.
His group? I don't understand. Is that botanists or something?
No, his political group, Mom.
El Compañeros de la Muerte.
The Companions of Death? That's colorful.
Yeah, they plan to overthrow their government and establish a regime of democratic ideals and crop sharing.
Oh, and no better place to start than right here on Fifth Avenue.
The movie starts in Manhattan and ambles to the Hamptons, Mississippi, and Idaho, where Beatty finds himself scandalously in bed with Andy McDowell in Sun Valley as her dad, Charlton Heston, bursts in.
Button is a princess, you see. And that makes you the prince. And the prince must fight a dragon to get to his princess. I am that dragon.
Scenes and characters like that show a certain promise, but the movie kind of falls apart at the 1 hour mark and never gets organized again. Apparently they wrote it as they went along, so it's a case of a movie that fails even though individual scenes work, some of them pretty well.
Happy birthday to you. Remember?
From the hardware store.
You asked me what I was doing on Halloween? This is what I'm doing. I'm going to the party with you guys.
That's fantastic.
We can't do that.
I like the supporting performances by a lot of the women, including Andy McDowell, Jenna Elfman, and Nastasia Kinski, even though there's a lot of unnecessary confusion about whether she's pregnant and by whom. At that point, this plot was as confusing as the Hong Kong movie. The stars are all pros, and they deliver. When studios hide a picture, it almost always does more harm than good. With Town and Country, I'm disappointed, but I'm still kind of affectionate.
I think you're being far too kind to this dreadful bomb.
Okay.
You could see an episode of Love American Style with Dick Gautier and Karen Valentine that'd be more sophisticated about these relationships. I mean, this has got such a musty feel to it. There's a scene you talked about with an 80-year-old Charlton Heston threatening a 60-year-old Warren Beatty to not sleep with a 45-year-old Andy McDowell. And everybody's about 40 years too old for that scene. Don't touch my daughter.
That was what was funny.
It was
That was what was funny.
What scenes? You said some scenes worked for you. No scenes worked for me. The best thing I could say for this movie is it was mostly in focus, except for when the camera was on Beatty.
I like the fact,
they
for
didn't wanna
example,
show
that
him
Beatty
looking too
doesn't have
old.
any idea who's living in his apartment, including his maid's boyfriend, and the Turkish guy who comes in, and all of the other spouses and so forth.
You can catch that on the Brady Bunch.
Okay, look, I'm giving it thumbs down. I mean, what else can I say except it's not... I mean, you've already forgotten Freddie Got Fingered, obviously. On a scale where Freddie Got Fingered is here, you know, it's you know, it's up around here somewhere.
We're mucking around at the bottom of the scale here, okay? All right, coming up next, our internet correspondent, Michaela Pereira, joins us with a report on animated shorts that look good on the web, even at 56K.
Well, that's right, Richard. I've got lots of great stuff that runs the gamut from fun to surprisingly moving. That's coming up.
And looking ahead to next week's openings, Heath Ledger plays a poor man posing as a nobleman in A Knight's Tale. Yes! And Jennifer Jason Leigh in The King is Alive.
Where do you live now?
Los Angeles.
Wow. Are you in the movies?
Joining us again is our internet correspondent, Michaela Pereira, with a look at some animated movies online that look good even if your web connection is not at Warp Drive.
That's true. I heard a rumor that Roger's DSL service went out, so this is just for Roger. We're first going to head to adamfilms.com, where you can find A Letter from the Western Front. It's an artistic short film created especially for the web, with a mix of low and high tech. Director Daniel M. Kanemoto used common Adobe software to bring to life his original watercolor paintings to great effect. Now, the result is a moody and dark canvas that serves as a backdrop for the story that is set in the trenches of France during World War I.
After running for what seemed like miles, I finally spotted the other end of the field. I became sick with fear when I saw what was in front. Less than 100 yards ahead stood an armed German soldier.
My favorite part of this short is the original score, which is beautifully performed by a 25-piece orchestra. Letter is a carefully crafted animation, a thoughtful reflection on lives that were changed forever by the atrocities of war. Now, my next film and all the ones that follow are from ifilm.com. The first one, One Day a Man Bought a House, is a wonderful stop-motion animation fable of a man who has great difficulty getting rid of an uninvited house guest. For him, this situation is a dilemma with no apparent solution, yet for the past, it is the perfect resolution for a terribly lonely soul. Can we, as the narrator asks, tell the difference between friend and foe?
The rat had never seen a bear trap before, and perceived instead a dynamic, expressive steel construction and installation, and understood the man to be a connoisseur of art.
I enjoyed this short for its storybook appeal and old world charm. It reminded me of made-up stories told to me as a child at bedtime. Now, in our next animation, all the hokey cliches of action flicks are cleverly rolled into one in 5 minutes Maximum Cops, a fun little parody of this popular movie genre. What sends this short over the edge, though, is the Arnold-esque voiceover narration of a list of truisms that tend to plague so many Hollywood blockbusters. For example,
cars often end up hanging over the edge of a cliff. And they usually fall when a bird lands on the front part of the car.
The oddly named 5 minutes Maximum Cops had me laughing, and it will you as well, especially if you've seen your share of action films. And speaking of action films, this salute to the great Hong Kong action master John Woo and his cult classic The Killer is a little animation called Killer Bean 2. The original Killer Bean debuted in 1995. Now, this sequel was over 4 years in the making. When the mild-mannered little legume's sleep is disrupted by a party down the road, he straps on his firepower with the intention of kicking some butt. What follows is possibly one of the best gunfights I've seen in a good long while. Now, I have to say, it was easy at times to forget that our hero is a vegetable. Killer Bean 2 has been around for a while on the web, but it is still by far one of the most enjoyable animations that I've seen. Fellas?
Thanks, Michaela. You know, my DSL supplier did go bankrupt, and so for the last month I've been back at 56K. And I really appreciate this animation because it takes a lot less bandwidth and you can enjoy it on an ordinary computer.
Well, we have a T1 line here at work, and I certainly feel your pain having to go back to 56K.
All right, thanks, Michaela. Coming up next, a mystery man turns a family's life upside down in With a Friend Like Harry. An oddball interloper disrupts the lives of a young couple in our next movie. With A Friend Like Harry, an unsettling dark comedy from France. Laurent Lucas and Mathilde Seigné are Michelle and Claire, a working-class couple with 3 irritable daughters on their way to a summer break at their remote fixer-upper of a country home. Along the way, they bump into Harry, a high school classmate of Michelle's, who's independently wealthy and strangely obsessed with Michelle, who barely remembers him.
Je venais chercher un œuf. J'ai vu tout à l'heure qu'il y en avait. J'ai lu quelque part qu'il faut manger un jaune d'œuf cru après chaque orgasme. C'est excellent pour la virilité. Bon.
That's Sergi Lopez as Harry, the kind of guy who's always standing there when you turn around, smiling a creepy smile and asking how you're doing.
Qu'est-ce que tu fais?
Je comble le puisard là-bas.
Pourquoi il prend la bouchette? Ça fait flipper Claire à cause des gamines.
With A Friend Like Harry delves deep into Hitchcock territory with much black humor and many startling turns as Harry begins to eliminate everything standing in the way of Michelle's happiness. Based on some bad high school scribblings, Harry believes Michelle is a great writer, and the country home starts to resemble the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. Harry is so obviously the dark side of Michelle that I thought he might be a Fight Club-style alter ego, but Harry's for real. He's just not very believable. With A Friend Like Harry has interesting performances and a definite style, but it's so self-conscious and so arbitrary that it left me cold, so I'm giving it a reluctant thumbs down.
Boy, I really got involved, and the thing I liked about it as a thriller is that it never declared exactly what kind of a thriller it was. I mean, Harry is one of the names for the devil, so is this guy satanic, and does he have supernatural powers? Yeah. Or is he just a friend? Or is he some kind of a stalker? And is he going to cause actual harm to these people? Or is he, in fact, only going to annoy them by being such a pal to them? And the neat thing about the movie...
answers to some of those questions.
No. The neat thing about the movie, because answers just give you a formula, the neat thing about the movie is that it's alive. It keeps redefining what it might be about.
Well, it's very much slow at the beginning. Maybe it becomes a little more of a lively film as it goes along, but the first 50 minutes are really tedious. And then the actions that take place, they just don't really follow who this guy is, and we don't know who this guy is. And I want to know a little bit more about him.
We don't know who this guy is.
I want to know a little bit more about him, Roger. Where does he come from? What happened to him before this?
That's the whole point.
Yeah, that to me made it unsatisfying.
Okay, when we come back, take 2 for an animated classic, now back in theaters. And now our Take 2 segment. Admirers of Japanese animation consider Akira one of the greatest examples of the form. And now Katsuhiro Otomo's 1988 classic is back in a restored digital version. It will go to DVD in the fall, but after a successful theatrical launch in New York, it's now open in Los Angeles and San Francisco. In a post-apocalyptic Tokyo, kids on motorcycles fight a freak created by a secret military project. Look at the kinetic energy in sequences like this one. This isn't computer animation, it's all drawn by hand.
All right, now, next move.
I saw a screening of Akira with state-of-the-art digital projection, and I thought it looked really good, although you could tell it was video and it lacked the richness of film. People who say digital projection is as good as celluloid are wishful thinkers. Still, as digital, it's impressive. Pioneer may open the movie theatrically in more cities if it does well in these early runs, and I really hope they do, because Akira, seen on the big screen with surround sound, is an awesome experience.
All right, thanks, Roger. Okay, recapping this week's movies, 2 thumbs down for The Mummy Returns, 2 thumbs up, though, for Time and Tide, 2 thumbs down for Town and Country, and a split decision for With a Friend Like Harry.
Remember, you can hear our reviews on Ebert-Roeper-movies.com and read us in print at suntimes.com. Next week, we'll be back with Heath Ledger in A Knight's Tale, and until then, the balcony is closed.
You know, you're right about The Rock. It's bogus billing to say he stars in The Mummy Returns.
It's bait and switch, but you're wrong about With a Friend Like Harry. You want closure, and that movie is not going to give you closure.
I just want a few answers, just a few. I don't need them all, but...